The deep space vessel Aurora floated silently at the edge of our solar system. Commander John Baker stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the strange object that appeared on their scanners just hours ago. "What do you make of it, Susan?" he asked, turning to his second-in-command. Susan West frowned at her console. "It's definitely not one of ours, sir. The design is like nothing I've ever seen. And it's damaged." John moved closer to the main screen. The alien ship drifted lifelessly against the backdrop of stars. Its hull was punctured in several places, and a dim, flickering light pulsed from within. "Life signs?" John asked. "Faint, but yes," replied Alan Green, the ship's science officer. "If they're alive in there, they won't be for long. Their life support is failing." John didn't hesitate. "Prepare a rescue team. Full containment protocols." Susan looked up sharply. "Sir, protocol states we should report to Earth Command first and wait for instructions. We have no idea who or what is on that ship. And by the time Earth responds, whatever is on that ship will be dead," John said firmly. "I'll take full responsibility. Now prepare that team." 3 hours later, John led a small crew across the void between their ships. The alien vessel was beautiful despite its damage, sleek and curved like a massive silver leaf. They found an entry point and cut their way inside. The air within was thin but breathable. Strange symbols covered the walls, glowing with a soft blue light. The rescue team moved carefully through the corridors until they reached what appeared to be the main control room. Inside, they found them. Tall, slender beings with iridescent blue skin and large, almond-shaped eyes. Most lay unconscious, but one stood trembling beside a control panel. "We come in peace," John said, raising his empty hands. "We're here to help." The alien's eyes widened. It spoke, and to everyone's surprise, a device on its wrist translated its words into broken English. "Why? Help us. Not know us." "Because you need help," John replied simply. "That's enough for us." The alien seemed confused by this answer. It identified itself as Zilnar, ambassador of the Veldari. Their ship had suffered a catastrophic failure while exploring this region of space. Of the 200 crew, only 50 remained alive. "Our ship cannot be repaired," Zilnar explained. "We accepted death." "Well, unaccepted," John said with a small smile. "We can take you all aboard our vessel. We have room and supplies." For several long moments, Zilnar stared at John as if trying to understand some complex puzzle. Then it placed a 6-fingered hand over its chest and bowed deeply. "This action, not understood. In all our travels, no species helps without reason." Its voice became formal. "By ancient laws of Veldari, when life is given, life is owed. You save us without cause. We now stand in obligation to humanity." John shook his head. "That's not necessary. We don't expect anything in return." "Not choice," Zilnar insisted. "Is our way. Obligation is sacred bond. Now and forever, Veldari serve humanity." Over the next several hours, the Aurora crew transferred the surviving Veldari to their ship. The aliens watched in wonder as human doctors treated their injured without question or demand. "They keep saying they're in our obligation now," Susan told John as they oversaw the operation. "What do you think that means?" John watched as a human medic gently wrapped a thermal blanket around a young Veldari child. "I don't know, but I think we just made first contact in the best possible way, by being human." As the Aurora turned back toward Earth, carrying the last survivors of an ancient race, Zilnar stood at a viewport watching its ship and its past disappear into the darkness. "In all our history," it whispered, "we have never known a debt like this. What happens when humanity is in your obligation? We will spend our remaining days learning the answer." 6 months had passed since the rescue of the Veldari. Now, a small colony of the blue-skinned aliens lived in a special facility built by the United Nations Space Administration near the Arizona desert. The location was chosen for its climate, which was similar to the Veldari homeworld. Lisa Martinez parked her car outside the main entrance and grabbed her notebook. As a cultural anthropologist, she had been assigned to help the aliens understand human society. But lately, she felt like she was learning more from them than they were from her. The guard at the gate nodded as she showed her ID. "Morning, Dr. Martinez. Kevra has been asking for you." Lisa smiled. Kevra was a young Veldari scientist who had become her closest contact. "Is something wrong?" "Not wrong," the guard said. "But they've been working on something all night. Said it was important." Lisa found Kevra in the community garden. The slender alien was carefully tending to a row of earth plants. When Lisa approached, Kevra looked up with those large, expressive eyes. "Lisa, friend," Kevra said, using the Veldari term for a trusted non-family member. "I have made a discovery about obligation." Lisa sat on a nearby bench. "What kind of discovery?" Kevra joined her, moving with the graceful, fluid motion typical of the Veldari. "I have studied your Earth history. In many human cultures, obligation exists but is temporary. This is strange to us." "What do you mean by temporary?" Lisa asked. "When human saves another human life, gratitude is expected, maybe small gifts or thanks. Then the debt is considered paid." Kevra's voice held genuine confusion. "How can life debt ever be paid? Is impossible." Lisa considered this. "I guess we believe that people should help each other without expecting to be repaid. That's just being decent." Kevra's skin darkened slightly, a sign of strong emotion among the Veldari. "But this makes no sense in a universe of limited resources. If help is given without return, the helper becomes weaker. This leads to extinction." "But cooperation makes both groups stronger," Lisa countered. "We help each other, and everyone benefits." Kevra stood suddenly and walked to a flowering plant. "Look at this earth flower. Yesterday, Zilnar wanted to cut it for study. I said no. Do you know why?" Lisa shook her head. "Because it brings joy to humans who walk by. Its purpose is not just to exist for itself or for Veldari. Its purpose includes making humans happy." Kevra turned to face Lisa. "This is what obligation means. Our purpose now includes human happiness." Something in the alien's tone worried Lisa. "Kevra, you don't need to live solely for our benefit. You have your own lives to live. You do not understand. When you saved last 50 Veldari, you saved entire future of our people." Kevra's voice became formal. "In our history, such a debt can only be paid one way, by becoming Valshera." "What does that mean?" Lisa asked. "There is no perfect translation. The closest is living tools. We now exist to serve human purpose." Lisa stood up quickly. "No, that sounds like slavery. We would never accept that." "It is not slavery," Kevra insisted. "It is highest honor. Besides, choice was made when your Commander Baker saved us. The obligation already exists." Before Lisa could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the compound. The garden's speaker system crackled to life. "All personnel report to the main hall immediately," said the voice of Director Paul Adams. "We have received an urgent communication from deep space." Kevra's skin paled to a light blue. "They have found us." "Who?" Lisa asked, but Kevra was already moving toward the main building. "The hegemony," Kevra said over one shoulder. "The Great Alliance of Worlds. They have strict rules about contact with developing planets. By saving us, humanity has broken those rules without knowing." Lisa hurried to keep up. "Is that bad?" Kevra stopped suddenly and turned to face her. "It depends. But now, your people will learn what it truly means to have the Veldari in your obligation. Because soon, you will need us more than you know." The main hall of the Veldari compound was packed with people. Humans in suits and uniforms stood nervously alongside the blue-skinned aliens. At the front of the room, Director Paul Adams tried to maintain order. "Please, everyone stay calm," he said, raising his hands. "We've just received word that 3 ships of unknown design have entered our solar system. They've bypassed all our defense systems and will reach Earth orbit in less than 6 hours. A wave of worried whispers spread through the crowd. Lisa found Kevra standing near the back wall. "Is it really the hegemony?" she asked. Kevra nodded. "Yes. The designs match Galatian ships. They are one of the 7 ruling species of the hegemony." Zilnar, the Veldari ambassador, stepped forward. "We must speak with your world leaders immediately. The hegemony does not usually approach without a full war fleet. That they send only 3 ships suggests they are here to assess, not attack." 2 hours later, Frank Wilson entered the United Nations emergency session in New York. As the head of the newly formed First Contact Division, he had been thrown into a situation no human had trained for. "Mr. Wilson, you've spoken with the Veldari about this hegemony," said the UN Secretary General. "What are we dealing with?" Frank straightened his tie. "The hegemony is an alliance of 7 advanced species that control most of our local galactic arm. According to the Veldari, they have strict rules about contacting what they call pre-jump civilizations, species that haven't developed faster than light travel. And we broke those rules by rescuing the Veldari," someone said. "Yes," Frank replied. "But there's a complication. The Veldari Declaration of Obligation gives us some protection. Apparently, such bonds are deeply respected throughout the hegemony." Before anyone could respond, a staff member rushed in. "They're here. The alien ships have entered orbit and are broadcasting on all frequencies." The room's main screen lit up to show a being unlike anything humans had seen before. It had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on a face that resembled polished stone. When it spoke, its voice was translated by Veldari technology. "People of Earth, I am Ambassador Drell of the Galatian Assembly, representing the hegemony of 7. Your unauthorized contact with the Veldari has violated our most sacred protocols. I will descend to your world with a small delegation to determine the appropriate response." The transmission ended. The room erupted in panicked discussion until the Secretary General called for order. "Mr. Wilson, you will lead our greeting team," she said. "Choose your people carefully." 4 hours later, Frank stood on the landing pad with Lisa Martinez, Commander John Baker, and Zilnar. When the Galatian shuttle landed, it made almost no sound. The door opened, and 3 tall figures emerged. Ambassador Drell was even more imposing in person, nearly 8 feet tall with skin like polished granite. The 2 others were different species, one insect-like, the other almost translucent. "You have upset the balance of this sector," Drell said without greeting. "Pre-jump species must develop naturally or risk becoming threats to galactic stability." Frank stepped forward. "We meant no offense. We simply help those in need." "A typical human response," said the insect-like alien. "Impulsive. Dangerous." Zilnar moved to stand between the groups. "Honored representatives, I must inform you that the Veldari now stand in formal obligation to humanity. They saved our entire species without thought of reward." The 3 hegemony representatives exchanged glances. "Is this true?" Drell asked. "A formal Valshera obligation." "It is," Zilnar confirmed. Something changed in Drell's posture. "That complicates matters. The laws of obligation predate even the hegemony itself." "What does that mean for Earth?" Frank asked. "It means," Drell said slowly, "that this assessment has become far more complex. If humanity has earned the obligation of an elder race through an act of selfless preservation, then you are not the primitives we assumed." The insect alien chittered angrily, but Drell raised a hand to silence it. "Frank Wilson of Earth, you have 3 days to make your case for why we should not isolate your world completely from the galactic community. The obligation bond gives you this chance. Nothing more." As the aliens returned to their shuttle for private discussions, Frank turned to Lisa. "What just happened?" he whispered. "I think," Lisa said, watching the Veldari bow deeply to the retreating hegemony members, "we just found out what having the Veldari in our obligation really means." Sophia Reyes had not slept in 24 hours. As the lead data analyst for the First Contact Division, she had been given an important job. Study all the information the Velderi had shared about their history and culture. Something didn't add up about their damaged ship, and Sophia was determined to find out what. She rubbed her tired eyes and took another sip of coffee. The Velderi had provided access to their records as part of their obligation to humanity. Most of it was scientific or cultural information, carefully organized and translated. But there was one file that seemed different from the rest. It was buried deep in their historical archives and had strange security markers. "What are you hiding?" she whispered to herself as she worked to decode the file. When the file finally opened, Sophia stared at her screen in shock. She grabbed her phone and called Frank Wilson. "Frank, you need to see this now," she said, her voice tight with urgency. An hour later, Frank, Lisa, and Commander Baker stood in Sophia's office, looking at the decoded files. "Are you absolutely sure about this translation?" Frank asked. Sophia nodded. The Velderi's ship wasn't damaged by accident. They were running from something called the Void Collective. Lisa leaned closer to the screen. "What is the Void Collective?" "According to these records, it's a machine intelligence that targets and destroys organic civilizations," Sophia explained. "The hegemony has been at war with them for centuries." Commander Baker crossed his arms. "So the Velderi brought this enemy to our doorstep and didn't tell us." "We need to speak with Zilnar immediately," Frank said. They found the Velderi ambassador in the garden with Kevra and several other Gulderi. When confronted with the decoded files, Zilnar's skin turned a deep blue, a sign of shame. "It is true," Zilnar admitted. "Our ship was damaged while fleeing a Void Collective scout vessel. We hoped that by hiding in your system, we would lose them. And you didn't think to warn us," Frank demanded. "We were afraid," Kevra said softly. "Afraid you would reject us if you knew we were being hunted." "We thought we had escaped them," Zilnar added. "But if the hegemony found us so quickly." Lisa understood first. "You think the collective might have followed you here too?" "It is possible," Zilnar said. "They are relentless in their pursuit of organic life." Frank paced the garden path. "We need to tell the hegemony representatives that we know about the collective." "No," said Commander Baker firmly. "Not yet. First, we need to know if Earth is actually in danger." As if in answer to his question, a young Gulderi rushed into the garden. "Ambassador, urgent message from the hegemony ships." Minutes later, they all stood watching a new transmission from Ambassador Drell. The stone-faced alien looked grim. "People of Earth, we have detected unknown signatures at the edge of your solar system. They match Void Collective scout ships. Your system was previously unknown to the Collective, but it appears the Velderi have led them to you." The transmission ended. A heavy silence fell over the room. "You knew," Frank said to Zilnar. "You knew all along this might happen." The Velderi ambassador bowed deeply. "We did. And now our obligation to humanity becomes clear. We are bound to protect you, even at the cost of our own extinction." "How?" Lisa asked. "There are only 50 of you." "We have knowledge," Kevra said. "We understand the collective's tactics, and we have technology we can share." Zilnar straightened to his full height. "The hegemony will not help you. They will see Earth as a lost cause and establish quarantine boundaries beyond your system. But the Velderi will stand with humanity." Commander Baker looked skeptical. 50 aliens against a machine collective that has the hegemony on the run. Those aren't great odds. Sophia, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. "But what if that's actually our advantage? The collective has never encountered humans before. They don't know how we think or fight." Frank nodded slowly. "You're right. We're unpredictable to them, and maybe that's exactly what we need to be." Outside the compound, the sun was setting. Unknown to everyone on Earth, 3 small ships with no lights or heat signatures slipped past Neptune, moving steadily toward the inner planets. The Void Collective had arrived. The military conference room buzzed with nervous energy. Maps and data streams covered the screens around them. United Nations officials sat on one side of the table, military leaders on the other. In the middle sat 3 Veldari and Ambassador Drell from the Hegemony. The Void Collective operates on pure logic, Drell explained. They analyze patterns, predict responses, and counter them with perfect efficiency. No organic species can match their processing speed. So how has the Hegemony fought them for centuries? Asked General Patricia Harris. With superior technology and numbers, Drell said. But we lose ground every year. The collective adapts to our strategies faster than we can create new ones. Lieutenant Peter Collins, a young Navy officer who had been quietly taking notes, suddenly spoke up. That's because you're thinking like the Hegemony. All eyes turned to him. Peter swallowed hard but continued. Sorry, but I've been studying the battle reports you shared. Your military strategies are all based on overwhelming force and predictable formations. The collective can easily calculate responses to that. Ambassador Drell's 4 eyes narrowed. And what would you suggest, Lieutenant? Guerrilla tactics, Peter said. Throughout Earth's history, smaller forces have defeated larger ones by being unpredictable. The collective's algorithms are designed to counter logical, efficient attacks, so we need to be illogical and inefficient. Drell made a sound like stones grinding together, the Galatian equivalent of laughter. Primitive thinking. The collective would destroy such disorganized efforts. Not if they can't predict them, Peter insisted. He pointed to the tactical display. Look at this formation the collective uses. It's perfect, too perfect. They expect optimal responses. What if we deliberately use suboptimal tactics? Frank Wilson, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. Ambassador Drell, is it possible the collective has never encountered human battle strategies before? They have not, Zilnar answered instead. Humans are unknown to the galactic community until now. A spark of hope lit in Peter's eyes. Then they have no baseline for predicting how we'll respond. We can use that. Over the next 2 days, Peter worked with Veldari engineers to design hybrid weapons that combined hegemony technology with unpredictable human control systems. The Veldari threw themselves into the work with alarming intensity, often forgetting to eat or sleep. Kever explained to Lisa, "This is our obligation. We will give everything to protect humanity." On the 3rd day, long-range sensors detected a Void Collective scout ship approaching Earth. It was time to test Peter's theory. 3 ships launched to intercept the collective vessel, 1 hegemony observer craft, and 2 hastily modified Earth fighters equipped with Veldari tech. Peter Collins commanded one of the Earth vessels. "Remember the plan," Peter said over the comm. "Do not engage directly. Use random, evasive patterns. Aim for the spots we identified, then immediately change position." The collective ship was beautiful in a terrifying way, a perfect black sphere that seemed to absorb light around it. When it detected the approaching vessels, it deployed smaller units that formed a precise geometric pattern. "They're running standard intercept algorithms," reported the hegemony observer, preparing to. "Wait, what are you doing?" Peter had cut his engines completely, letting his ship tumble end over end toward the collective formation. The second Earth ship fired in seemingly random bursts, not at the targets but at the space around them. The collective units hesitated, their perfect formation faltering as they tried to calculate these strange maneuvers. "Now," Peter shouted. Both Earth ships fired simultaneously from their unpredictable positions. The shots connected with the confused collective units. Several exploded in silent bursts of light. The main collective ship immediately changed tactics, but the Earth vessels were already moving in new random patterns that defied prediction. Within 20 minutes, the collective scout retreated, leaving behind 5 destroyed units. When they returned to Earth, Peter found Ambassador Drell waiting. The massive alien regarded him silently for a long moment. Inefficient, wasteful of fuel and resources, tactically unsound by any standard teaching, Drell finally said. Then, surprisingly, he added, and completely effective against the collective. Perhaps there is hope for Earth after all. Peter smiled. That's the thing about humans, Ambassador. We're at our best when we don't follow the rules. But his smile faded as the tactical officer approached with new data. The main collective fleet had been detected, and it was far larger than anyone had anticipated. 3 days after the successful battle with the collective scout ship, Carol Hernandez arrived at the Hegemony Council meeting. As Earth's newly appointed representative, she felt out of place among the alien delegates. 7 different species sat around the massive table on the Galatian command ship in orbit above Earth. Ambassador Drell introduced her to the council. This is Carol Hernandez of Earth. She will speak for her planet. Carol nodded respectfully to each member. The Moradin representative, a tall being with silver skin and 3 arms, barely acknowledged her. The Moradin were one of the founding races of the Hegemony, and clearly displeased by human involvement. The situation is simple, the Moradin representative said. The Void Collective Fleet will reach Earth in 7 days. We must establish defense lines beyond this solar system. You mean abandon Earth, Carol said, understanding immediately. Earth was never part of the Hegemony, replied the Moradin coldly. The needs of established worlds must come first. Ambassador Drell shifted uncomfortably. The Veldari obligation bond complicates matters. A primitive custom, dismissed the Moradin. The Veldari are few. Their extinction alongside humans would be regrettable but acceptable. Carol struggled to keep her voice steady. So you'll just sacrifice an entire planet to save hundreds of others? Yes, the Moradin said. It is simple mathematics. The meeting continued for hours, with Carol fighting for Earth's survival against the cold logic of the Hegemony. Only Ambassador Drell seemed sympathetic, but even he admitted the collective's force was too great for the Hegemony to risk direct confrontation. After the meeting, Carol stayed behind to review the Hegemony battle plans. Something caught her attention, a small anomaly in the defensive grid they planned to establish beyond Pluto. She copied the data and returned to Earth. Sophia Reyes analyzed the plans all night. By morning, she had reached a disturbing conclusion. They're not just abandoning us, Sophia explained to Frank, Carol, and Peter in the secure conference room. The Moradin have sabotaged our defense systems. Look at these power relays. They've been programmed to fail precisely when the collective arrives. Why would they do that? Frank asked. To make us a better target, Carol realized. They're setting up Earth as a sacrifice to keep the collective busy while they establish their defensive line. Zilnar and Kevra entered the room as she finished speaking. The Veldari ambassador's skin had turned a deep, angry blue. We suspected this, Zilnar said. The Moradin have suggested such strategies before. Carol turned to the aliens. What can we do? We can't fix all these sabotaged systems in time. Zilnar and Kevra exchanged a long look. Finally, Zilnar spoke. There is one option. The colony ship that brought us here is hidden in orbit around your moon. It contains our historical records and genetic repository, the future of our species. If we convert its power core to a weapon, it could destroy the Moradin saboteurs and their equipment. But that would mean losing everything that remains of your civilization, Lisa said, having just entered the room. Yes, Kevra said simply, but this is our obligation to humanity. We can't ask you to do that, Frank protested. You are not asking, Zilnar said firmly. We are offering. This is what obligation means. Before anyone could argue further, the Veldari left to prepare. That night, Lisa found Kevra standing alone, looking up at the stars. There must be another way, Lisa pleaded. Perhaps, Kevra said, but we cannot risk waiting to find it. The Moradin technicians will finish their sabotage tomorrow. We must act tonight. But your history, your future, will mean nothing if humanity falls, Kevra finished. You never understood our obligation, Lisa. It is not about paying a debt. It is about finding purpose. Humans gave us life without asking for anything in return. Now we give our future so that yours may continue. The next morning, Frank Wilson received word that the Moradin ship had been destroyed by an unexplained power surge. With it went all the sabotage equipment and plans. When the hegemony demanded answers, Carol Hernandez stood before them, her head held high. "It appears," she said carefully, "that someone chose to honor their obligations." The news spread throughout the hegemony fleet. The Veldari had sacrificed their last colony ship to save Earth. For many of the alien species, this act changed everything they thought they knew about humans and their allies. The day the Void Collective arrived, Earth's sky filled with strange lights. The massive black ships moved into position around the planet, their perfect formation like a deadly geometric pattern. Major Grace Taylor stood on the command deck of the orbital defense platform Bastion. As the officer in charge of Earth's last line of defense, she watched the enemy approach with steady eyes. "All stations report ready," said her second in command. Grace nodded. "Remember Lieutenant Collins' strategy. Unpredictable patterns only. No standard military responses." Throughout the solar system, a strange mix of forces prepared for battle. Human ships flew alongside the few remaining hegemony vessels that had chosen to stay and fight. Most of the hegemony had retreated beyond Neptune, establishing their quarantine line. The Veldari, now without their colony ship, had divided themselves among the human vessels. Their knowledge of collective tactics proved invaluable as the first wave of enemy ships approached. "They're scanning our defenses," reported a technician on the Bastion. "Standard collective pre-attack pattern." "Then let's show them something non-standard," Grace ordered. "Execute Operation Chaos." Across Earth's defensive line, ships suddenly powered down, appearing disabled. Others fired their engines at random intervals, creating a disorganized mess that defied all tactical logic. The collective ships hesitated, their perfect formation faltering slightly. "They're confused," Kevra said from his position beside Grace. "Their algorithms cannot predict this behavior." "Now," Grace ordered. Earth's ships fired from their seemingly random positions. The shots connected with surprised collective vessels. Explosions bloomed in the blackness of space. For a moment, it seemed Earth's strange strategy might work. But then the main collective fleet arrived. Hundreds of ships, far more than Earth could possibly defeat. "They're adapting," Kevra warned as the collective ships began to change their formation. "They are learning from our tactics." In the battle that followed, Earth fought with desperate creativity. Human pilots flew patterns that made no logical sense, confusing the machine intelligence. The Veldari provided technical support, helping to exploit weaknesses in collective ships. But hour by hour, the collective pushed closer to Earth. The Bastion shook as enemy fire struck its shields. "We can't hold them much longer," Grace admitted as she watched another human ship explode. On the main view screen, Frank Wilson appeared from the Emergency Command Center on Earth. "Major Taylor, we need to buy more time. Our ground defenses aren't ready." Grace looked around at her tired crew. "We'll do what we can, sir." After the communication ended, Kevra approached her. "There is another option," the Veldari said quietly. "I'm listening." "Our ships contain what we call the final resort," Kevra explained. "We can convert our entire mass into energy in a controlled antimatter reaction." Grace stared at him. "You're talking about suicide." "We are talking about obligation," Kevra corrected. "The remaining 42 Veldari have discussed this. If we coordinate our final resort, we might destroy enough of the collective to save Earth." "That's your entire species," Grace said. "You'd be extinct." "Yes," Kevra said simply. "But humanity would survive." Grace shook her head. "I can't authorize that." "You do not need to," Kevra replied. "The decision is ours to make." Before Grace could respond, a new alert sounded. The collective's command node, a massive ship at the center of their formation, was advancing toward Earth. If it broke through, all would be lost. Kevra looked at the display, then back at Grace. "We must act now. The command node is vulnerable." Grace felt the weight of the moment crushing down on her. There has to be another way. "Perhaps there is," Kevra said. "But we do not have time to find it. This is what obligation means, Major Taylor. Our lives for yours." Kevra touched a small device on his wrist. Across the fleet, the remaining Veldari did the same. "No." Grace reached for him, but Kevra stepped back. "Tell Lisa that we finally understood what she tried to teach us," Kevra said. "Obligation is not slavery. It is choice." The Veldari ships began to move, forming their own perfect formation as they accelerated toward the collective command node. On the Bastion's screen, Grace watched as 42 beings prepared to sacrifice everything for a planet not their own. The choice now lay with humanity. Accept the sacrifice of an entire species, or find another way in the few minutes that remained. Lisa Martinez ran through the corridors of the Earth Defense Command Center. When she heard about the Veldari plan, she knew she had to act fast. "Frank," she called, bursting into the main control room. "We can't let them do this." Frank Wilson looked up from the tactical display showing the battle in orbit. "Lisa, we don't have a choice. The collective is breaking through our defenses." "There's always a choice," Lisa insisted. She turned to the communications officer. "Get me a channel to all Veldari ships now." As the officer worked, Lisa pulled out her notes on Veldari culture. "I've been studying their obligation customs for months. There's something we missed. A clause in their ancient laws about how obligations are fulfilled." The screen lit up, showing Kevra and other Veldari on their ships, already moving toward the collective command node. "Kevra, stop," Lisa pleaded. "According to your own laws, the one who holds the obligation has the right to determine how it is fulfilled." Kevra paused. "This is true, but..." "Then, as representatives of humanity, we invoke that right," Lisa said firmly. "Your obligation cannot be fulfilled by your extinction. It can only be fulfilled by your survival and prosperity alongside humans." There was silence as the Veldari processed her words. "She's right," Frank said, stepping forward. "We didn't save you just to watch you die for us. That's not what humanity wants from this obligation." On the screen, the Veldari seemed troubled, their skin shifting through shades of blue as they experienced emotional turmoil. "But how else can we save Earth?" Kevra asked. "The collective will not stop." Peter Collins, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. "What if we combine our approaches? The Veldari technology with human unpredictability." He pointed to the tactical display. "The collective expects either a logical attack or complete chaos. What if we give them a pattern that looks logical but changes in ways they can't predict?" Working rapidly, human and Veldari technicians created a new battle plan. Instead of sacrificing themselves, the Veldari ships formed a complex formation around the human vessels. To the collective, it appeared to be a standard hegemony attack pattern, but with a human twist. As the combined fleet engaged the enemy, Carol Hernandez made one last desperate call to the hegemony forces beyond Neptune. The Veldari were willing to sacrifice their entire species for a world not their own. She told them, "If that doesn't prove the worth of humanity, what would?" Her words reached Ambassador Drell, who had been troubled by the Moradans' earlier betrayal. After a brief but intense debate among the remaining council members, the hegemony ships began to move. In orbit around Earth, the battle reached its peak. The human Veldari fleet executed their hybrid strategy, appearing to follow logical patterns only to break them in ways the collective couldn't anticipate. For crucial minutes, they held the line, preventing the command node from advancing toward Earth. Then, just as their defenses began to fail, new ships appeared on the sensors. "Hegemony signatures," reported Major Taylor from the Bastion. "A lot of them." The hegemony fleet, led by Ambassador Drell's ship, tore into the collective's flank. Caught between two unpredictable forces, the collective ships began to falter. Their perfect formations broke apart as their algorithms failed to calculate responses fast enough. The command node, exposed for a critical moment, became vulnerable. "Now," Peter ordered. A concentrated barrage from Earth's ships, the Veldari vessels, and the hegemony fleet struck the collective command node simultaneously. The massive black ship shuddered, then erupted in a silent explosion that rippled through space. Without their central controller, the remaining collective ships fell into disarray. Some retreated, others simply shut down. Hours later, as the cleanup began, Lisa found Kevra standing at a viewport on the bastion, looking down at Earth. "You changed the meaning of our obligation," he said quietly. "No," Lisa replied. "I just helped you see what it really meant all along." Kevra turned to her. For thousands of years, the Veldari believed obligation was about servitude, about owing life. But humans showed us something different. You taught us that true obligation is not about debt or sacrifice. It's about building something together. Below them, Earth continued to turn, battered but unbroken. And around it, ships from 3 different civilizations worked side by side in a new kind of alliance, one based not on obligation, but on mutual respect. So Lisa asked with a smile, "What happens when humanity is in your obligation?" "We all find a better way forward," Kevra answered. "Together."